Hey everyone, my name is Brantley Fry and I serve as VP of People and Community at Southern Research in Birmingham, Alabama. I also am a member of the Rotary Club of Birmingham, where I serve as VP of Club Service. And in both of those roles, I get to think about connecting people and policy, which is one of my passions. I'm an attorney by training, and I often describe my career path as being nonlinear and non-traditional, but the common denominator definitely is putting people first and connecting them with various policies. And I am very fortunate to have had many opportunities to do so. And I love the work, both from a professional standpoint as well as from a volunteer standpoint with Rotary. So what does it mean to be an empathetic leader? I think being an empathetic leader is being someone who really can listen effectively and make connections both at an individual level and at a larger policy level. I think about my background as a lawyer and thinking about how policies impact people. The reason we have policy is so that we can have a better society and a better community. And where do those policies make sense for the most people? So understanding how different actions, whether they are my actions as a leader or my actions as part of an organization, how those impact individuals in a meaningful way. And so that's what I think of when I think about empathetic leadership, is really taking into account people's experiences that will be impacted by decisions that leaders make. Very recently, we have taken empathy and applied it in the policy perspective. I'm a member of a relatively new leadership team at my organization, and we came in within 6 to 8 months together as a leadership team. And the organization had undergone a tremendous amount of change in a relatively short amount of time. And one of the things that I was tasked with as VP of People and Community was to look at our corporate values. As we thought about making cultural changes and making sure that we have the very best workplace that we can have, values obviously come into play. If I'm honest, I was a little bit resistant to updating our corporate values because it felt very predictable. New leadership team equals new values. And so how did we start to think about that from a perspective of how it impacts people, and also how we develop trust with our colleagues, many of whom had experienced a lot of change in leadership over a short period of time, as I mentioned. So instead of having a leadership retreat where we came up with the new values and then told our colleagues about it, we took a very different approach. And what we did is we had workshops across the organization where we involved every single person on campus. And we asked for feedback on what the current values were at the time. You know, are they working? Are they still relevant? Do you identify with them? Do you even know what they are? And from that exercise and those myriad of conversations, we were able to develop an updated value statement that is current to our team and that resonates with individuals across the campus. So again, thinking about how policies that the leadership makes actually impact everybody across the organization on a daily basis. And I thought it was really important to have input from the whole team, because these are the values under which we operate every day. And so it doesn't make sense for the leadership team to just kind of decree from on high, which is, I think, a lot of times how that happens. We have to, as leaders, put people first. Leadership is about service. It's not about ego, or at least it shouldn't be. And so the idea of empathetic leadership relates squarely, in my view, to how we put people first and how we adapt and listen and develop trust among colleagues and among whether it's professionally or from a volunteer perspective. That's so critical, is to develop relationships where trust is part of that. But other leaders that I look towards and hope to model, and certainly have influenced how I lead in my current position, are organizational developers like Adam Grant. I also really like the work of Simon Sinek, Brene Brown. Those are three that come to my mind immediately as I think about how we make the workplace a better place for all people. I think they all have really good work. Adam Grant's Think Again, it was just mind-blowing to me and so important, especially at the time that I was reading. I was in a political position, and it challenges us to ask questions and be inquisitive and not just jump to conclusions about other people's opinions, but to have what he calls a scientist's mind. So a little bit ironic that later I ended up at a scientific research organization, because I really do identify with that and think it's so important, especially as we are trying to move away from the polarized society in which we live today. It's just simply not sustainable. So those are the ones that immediately come to mind. I also had another boss who was an excellent leader in the sense that she started every team meeting by talking about learning opportunities. So they weren't mistakes. They were opportunities for us to get better. So she would have us as a team go around and talk about what did we learn? How can we get better? And that has also always stuck with me. I think that was just exceptional leadership and thinking about there really should never be mistakes. They should always be learning opportunities. What do we think about when we are making sure that people would identify that the leadership team or that colleagues across the organization or are leading with empathy? The thing that comes to my mind immediately is trust and accountability. So are people doing the things that they say they're going to do? Are they following through on initiatives that they say that we're going to take seriously? Are they living into values? I always want to be described as what you see is what you get. I think authenticity, and that certainly relates to trust, is critical if you think about empathetic leadership. It also relates to whether a leader is approachable, which I think is critical as well. And the other thing, as we talk about leadership from an organizational standpoint, I believe that every single person is a leader in some way. And so thinking about that as well, I would want people to describe empathetic leadership and how that's visibly present by the fact that they also feel that they are making an impact and they are leading in their respective capacities in an organization. I think we would be silly and foolish in many ways if we don't recognize that the younger generations are demanding this. And I think it's a positive. It's not always easy. I would be naive if I said it was, but I think it's important that we take those requests seriously and that we look to how these younger generations really are pushing to make the workplace a better place. We have a lot to gain in doing that. We have so much more to lose if we don't, because we're still in a very tight job market, and we need to be in a position that we are recruiting people and that people want to stay in our workplaces. And I think having empathy and taking the individual person into account is critical to that success. How do I manage the balance between life and work? I don't know. It's a great question, and it's always asked. It's an interesting question, especially to ask women. I don't know that this question is asked of men nearly often enough. You often hear panels of women talking in leadership. At any conference you go to and you have a women's panel, that is a question that comes up every time. I can say that is not a question that comes up every time for men. So that would be one way that I would preface answering this question, is I hope we are asking the same of men as well. But personally, how I manage work-life balance, I would really want you to ask my children and my family. I think some days I do it exceptionally well, and other days I just bomb. It depends on the situation, but managing my calendar and making sure that not only I am living out what I say to my colleagues all the time, and what I've been the beneficiary of from bosses throughout my career, I've been very lucky, is that family comes first, period, end of story. And so I actually had, my daughter had some health issues when she was in high school, and I was working for a U.S. senator at the time who was about to go into a really, really tough election. And I was extremely worried about how my work was going to be impacted because, as I said, my daughter comes first, and there was just no negotiating that. And I've never been so relieved as when he said, family comes first. And he said exactly what I just said a minute ago. Those were his words, full stop. Family comes first. You take care of your family, and the work will wait. And that gave me a tremendous amount of freedom to balance. But I also recognize that that is not the case for many, if not most people. I have been very fortunate to have work opportunities that have allowed me that flexibility. And so I try to also model that for all of our employees, whether they're hourly employees or whether they are salaried employees. We want to find ways to support people in their lives. Work is just a portion of people's lives, and we want it to be rewarding. So how do we get better at asking for what we need? I think as leaders, we have to model that. I think we also have to ask the question. I don't think that we can assume that the people that we work with have that comfort. So really making space for people to ask the question, but also asking it of our direct reports or of our teams. What is it that you need? How can I better support you? So maybe one silver lining to COVID, and also I think we see it generationally with the millennials and Gen Z, I think have done a good job of asking for what they need. I know that has met some resistance from some of us who are older. It's because we didn't do that, but it's okay. And I think they are modeling, those generations are modeling what it's like to ask for your needs and to get your needs met in the workplace. And of course, there are limits to that. There's always going to be a balance. The work has to get done. But if we are providing opportunities for people to do the work and enough flexibility on how and when they do the work, then I think that it begins to balance out. And accountability, of course, is a big part of that. So if we are truly leading with empathy, we are putting people first. And we are giving space for people to, as we said earlier, to ask for what they need and to communicate how they want to balance their life and their work, recognizing that it's often hard to distinguish. I mean, work is such a big part of people's lives. We often talk about work-life balance, but how do we think about kind of life balance, recognizing that work is such a big component of our everyday lives. So I think having leaders who really lean into that way of thinking will allow that to translate to emerging leaders who maybe either don't view themselves as leaders because they're new to their career or they're just getting into the workforce, or they maybe feel like they're in a position that doesn't have a title that immediately connotes leadership. I really do believe that every single person is a leader in some way. You don't have to have direct reports. You don't have to have a fancy title. Individuals are leading by showing up and by doing their work well, and by contributing to the organization. So I think that's how it moves kind of up and down, and hopefully encourages emerging leaders to adapt and adopt the same philosophies.